Well, when I started this podcast a long time ago, the whole idea was to talk to anybody, right? And some of the most interesting podcasts I've listened to are just regular people. You know, not everybody has to be somehow known or famous or whatever, you know. I think there's a lot of people have done and seen a lot of cool stuff that aren't internet famous, you know.
Yeah. Everybody has a story.
Yeah.
Might not be the best story, but I guess when you dig in there, there's some kind of a story to everybody.
Yeah.
That's what I've always thought. So
Yeah. Well, I've known you for a long time. For people that are listening to this, Bip is one of our knife sharpeners here in the shop. But kind of as of late, it's coming up on a year, I guess. You started here at the beginning of 24.
January 2nd.
Yeah.
January 2nd. Retired December 31st and went to work on January 2nd.
Yeah, one day.
Took a weekend off.
2-day retirement.
Yep.
Yeah, it's we've known each other a long time, but you know, and you came in here initially, you're just kind of head down, doing your thing, kind of quiet, and it's funny because over time here, the shop has gotten to know you more and more, and they're like, "Well, Bip's pretty damn funny," you know. Bip's got some shit to say. But it's cool because we've had so many, and I've really loved this. We have such a young shop, like so many young kids, but it's nice to have some people in the shop who have had some life experience that have had to actually work hard jobs, you know, and just somebody that I think our employees can kind of turn to for a little bit of leadership, and not necessarily leadership from just a knife making perspective, but just, you know, like an uncle in the shop, kind of.
Yeah, life experience is what I call it.
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah,
maybe not the best experiences, but life experience, that's for sure.
Yeah,
you know, that I think that's what I have to offer all these younger generation that I work with here. That there is definitely a younger crew, and so it's makes it a lot more exciting, you know, to listen to them and the things they're going through, and you know, I kind of sit, like you said, I kind of sit back and listen a lot, and but it seems like they have started coming to me a little bit and asking my opinion on life experience, you know.
Yeah. You know, I've known you for a long time, and you're kind of Mr. Frenchtown out here in our small town, football stadium announcer and all that. And we'll get to some of that, but what I don't know is a lot of your actual history, you know, as far as you were born and raised right here, right? Right here.
I grew up about 3.5 miles down the road.
Yeah.
Right there in the great metropolis of Houston, Montana.
So what was, as a kid growing up here, what was this Frenchtown, you know, Frenchtown and Missoula Valley like back then?
You know, it was a lot more rural, a lot more, you know, open space and small ranches, and you know, everybody knew everybody, and I mean, it was a great place for as a youngster to grow up in Houston. And it was funny because people always say, "You're from Frenchtown." Oh no, I'm from Houston.
Yeah,
we have the H on the hill, and
which, for people that don't know, Houston's 5 miles down the road, basically. And it's got a bar. It used to have a mailbox, pretty much a bar and a few houses, and an exit off the interstate. Yeah,
it had a mercantile, Houston Merc, and the post office was inside the mercantile. Mm-hmm. And old Frank Sear owned the mercantile way back when. And then there was Larry's 6 Mile Tavern, and that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
You know? It had an exit with a sign. That was all it took.
Yeah. What did your parents do when you were growing up?
So my dad, he worked for himself. He worked for a Singer sewing company, mm-hmm. and he repaired sewing machines. And originally, when growing up, he worked for Singer here in Missoula, and then he also did some work for Safety Siping and Grooving out of Phoenix, Arizona, where they built tire siping machines.
Okay.
That's kind of how we got in the tire industry. But he traveled around and sold those machines to tire stores, and he worked with Westbrunk on that. And my mom just stayed home and took care of all of us kids. There's myself and 4 brothers and my sister, and it seemed like we always had 2 or 3 extras living with us, kids in the valley that
really,
growing up maybe didn't have what they needed at home, or kids that were, maybe in a little trouble, and their parents talked to my folks about maybe they can go to Frenchtown and live with you guys, and maybe get out of town. And
what was that like for you as a kid, having kind of some outside kids coming and living with you?
I was the youngest for a long time. I have a younger brother, Corey, who's 12 years younger than me. But, growing up, it was like, it was kind of like the Army, kind of like living in a barracks.
Really?
There was our old house is right there along the interstate, has a big red barn. It says, it used to say Montana Quarter Horse Ranch.
Yeah.
And, we owned about 40 acres there, and we had some Hereford cows and raised a bunch of horses. But we always had chores to do, and we always had extra mouths to feed. And so like our house had big bedrooms in the basement. And like we had one room that had like 4 beds in it, 4 single beds.
Yeah.
And you just picked a bed out. It's not like this is your room. I grew up, I really didn't have my own bedroom until I got into high school, and everybody else was gone.
Yeah.
And so we just, you picked a bed out, and that was a bed you slept in. And like I never had a dresser, like a dresser drawer with my clothes in it.
Yeah.
Because I really didn't have much for my own clothes. I had a lot of hand-me-downs. Mm-hmm. Our laundry room, we had a great big table, probably bigger than this table right here, probably twice as big. And my mom, when she would do laundry, she just folded clothes and put them on that table.
Yeah.
And when you needed clothes to wear, you went in there and you found something that fit. That's what you wore.
Yeah.
So it was, and it was always interesting, but with all the extra people in the house. But I think it was good. It kind of helped. Maybe it instilled something in me to, that's kind of the way I am now, is like
to help people out.
Yeah. Just everybody needs something at some point in their life, and maybe some direction. Mm-hmm. And, it was funny. You take those kids that were in trouble and really didn't have direction and didn't know what they were going to do with their lives, and you put them on a small ranch, and where in the morning you were going down to the barn and feeding animals before you went to school, and when you got home at night, you went down to the barn and took care of animals, and so it was like a little bit of work ethic and responsibility, because they weren't going to get fed unless you fed them.
Right.
And I think, for a lot of kids growing up, that was what they needed.
Yeah.
They just needed some responsibility and some direction. And
they probably enjoyed it.
I think over time they did. I mean, we had one kid that came to our house for Thanksgiving, and he stayed there for like 12 years.
Really?
Until he graduated from high school, because, his home life wasn't that great, and he had numerous brothers and sisters. His mom was a parent, and really couldn't take care of all of them. And so that kid, he just lived with us. I mean, he was like part of the family,
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah. That's kind of that definition of community, just taking care of other kids, or helping out your neighbor.
Yeah, it is. And I think maybe if we had a little more of that still, it would be helpful.
Yeah. I think kids, a lot of kids complain about, doing chores or doing this or doing that. But I think most of the best kids have responsibility of some kind. And it's really too bad, because I think there's a lot of kids out there that would probably thrive with it. But, if you're born and raised in an apartment complex, you don't even have that option. I don't think It's hard to know if like your kids, if my kids, you know, our kids grew up together, at least our younger ones, but they grew up real similar, and I don't know. It's like how would they even know how lucky they are to be able to have a 4-H animal or do some of the stuff, and you know their dad's, you know, griping at them like, hey, if you fed your steer, or you gone and tied up your steer, or you done this or done that, you know, and kind of pushing them to do stuff. But the opposite of that is being in an apartment complex or a housing tract or something where you have nothing to do, and it's maybe not even safe to be outside. You know, it's hard to even get across to kids. I think that's why travel is important where you can, to get kids exposed to other parts of whether it's the state, the country, or ideal even other countries. You know, we have been fortunate to take our kids on. I mean, when we got married in Costa Rica, we could barely afford to go, you know. But we took our kids down there, and part of what we did was just go drive around areas where they could see how other kids were living in other parts of the country. And it was like, you know, these kids aren't playing AAU basketball and raising 4-H pigs and, you know, AAU volleyball and going to dances. I mean, you know, now they also, though, in that culture had probably some pieces were missing because they had such a lack of things. I think family is super important, you know. And I think there was a lot of bonding. A lot of times families these days are so busy that then sometimes you start to wonder, like, God, we need to maybe cut some things out because all you're doing is on the run, you know?
Yeah, I think, you know, things are like too big. I think people step back. Think, you know, simple things. Mm-hmm. You know, my dad, he used to always say, you know, the best thing for the inside of a person is the outside of a horse. Mm-hmm. You know, and it's kind of a cliche type of talk, I think, and whatnot. But, you know, as I've gotten older, I've noticed it, you know, because I've had coworkers, you know, when I was at the tire store that, you know, kids that were from back east and they end up out here. And, you know, there was a kid that was in the military, and you could see he was just struggling, you know, just with life, you know, and, you know, dealing with roommates and whatnot. And one day I'm like, hey, I got to go feed cows. I need some help, you know, and he's like, I'll help you. You know, he'd do anything to get out of town. Yeah. And so I threw this kid on the truck, and we went home and loaded a bunch of hay on the truck and went down the road, and I had some cows out on pasture, and we went out there, and it was cold and snowy, and that kid, he's on the back of that truck, and he's just throwing flakes off to them cows, and got done. And I'm like, well, you want to get the gate? And he goes, let's just sit here a minute. Yeah. He goes, this is cool. This is nice. This is quiet. Yeah. You know, and he's like, those cows appreciated the hay. I mean, look at them. They're just like, they were waiting for us. And I'm like, yeah, that's what cows do. They wait for you. Yeah. And so it was funny. We sat there for 5 or 10 minutes and looked at the stars and watched the cows eat hay and kind of walked around them a little bit. And you know, I think that was probably what that kid needed. Yeah. That's what a lot of people need. Yeah. You know, it's funny. Just, you know, at night I find myself doing it. It drives my wife crazy, but, you know, I'll just hang out at the barn, and she'd be like, what are you doing? Well, I was just brushing a colt, you know, and, but I find myself doing that quite often. I'll just go down to the barn and grab a brush and just go pen to pen and brush horses and think about life and think about what I got to do and think about what's going on, and just slow down for a minute. And you know, those simple things like that, you can get some good thought processes going, you know. And
yeah, I think that's one of the real attractions to people who hunt, is that hunting season's kind of almost an excuse to have an excuse to go out in the woods and be out there. Yep. You know, as if you really need one. I mean, because you could go out and basically do that any time of year. Oh, yeah. You could take a camera out, or you could just go out. But a lot of people who hunt, most people who hunt, frankly, are not successful, but they love it. And I think it's getting away from their computer, from their desk job, from the busyness of life, and then just taking an afternoon, 1 o'clock in the afternoon nap on the side of a mountain, it doesn't get more peaceful and quiet than that.
Yeah, check out a little bit and check in on yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
Glass a hillside and just sit there and think with your thoughts, you know.
Right.
Without cell phone service and all the things.
Yeah, definitely without cell phone.
What you played sports in high school?
I did. I played football and basketball, and I was a pole vaulter and track.
You were a pole vaulter?
I was a pole. I had the school record for a long time.
Really?
Yeah. I think it was like 13.6 is what the record was.
Really?
Back then, that was high. Not high
You were
anymore,
you were a Brody Hardy back in the day.
Yeah. I don't know.
Were you pretty fast?
I don't know about that. I was. I'm not going to honk my horn, but toot toot. I was pretty quick. I was pretty fast. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I thought I was fast and that's what made me fast. But, my older brother, Tim, he was a really good quarterback in high school, and he went on and played college ball and went to Wazoo and he was like what would they call him, a prolific passer, you know, and he was all about it. He could really throw a ball, and I couldn't throw it to save my life. Not to mention I was 5'7", weighed 140 pounds,
right?
You know, soaking wet, and but I was fast, and so when I started playing, they decided, well, let's run the ball, let's run option, you know, and so I'd watch Air Force. Every time Air Force was on TV, I was watching Air Force because they ran the veer, you know, loaded backfield option, and I just thought that was the greatest thing, you know.
Yeah.
And so, yeah.
And you played for Tim Roscoe?
I played for Roscoe.
Tell people about who Tim Roscoe was.
He was, so for me, he was our neighbor. He lived about a mile down the road, and when I was in junior high, I babysat his kids for him, Kurt and Katie and Angela, and I babysat for him, and you know, my brothers obviously played for him while I was younger, and actually when I was confirmed in church, he was my sponsor. Oh,
really?
And I mean, we have a really tight relationship even today. He and I really, you know, sometimes I look to him for advice and whatnot, but and after high school, I was in college, and he came to me and said, "Hey, why don't you come coach for me? Come coach." And so I did that for about 4 or 5 years. I coached high school football here at Frenchtown, and really enjoyed that. And you know, kind of thought that's what maybe I wanted to do, was be a teacher and a coach.
Yeah. But, and he ended up being a Hall of Fame coach.
He had some most
wins
in Montana history. I think next to maybe Kowalski from Cutbank had quite a few wins, and actually Les Meyer actually has quite a few wins there.
Yeah, over in Fairfield.
Yep.
Yeah, no, Roscoe, when we moved here, it was more towards the end of his time, but he was still coaching back then. For a couple more years. That was in 2002, coming to the end. But, you know, it was fun to learn of just the decades of accomplishment. And it was, you know, he had just such a systematic approach to football, it seemed like, with running the ball. And it didn't matter if his line was big or small, or didn't matter if his quarterback could throw or not throw. Or he was just a coach that it just, he lived and breathed it. He was in the weight room with the kids. And he had a way of getting those somewhat committed kids to be committed.
Yeah, it was a process. It was funny because he had a little recipe card box in his locker, and every day of the year was on a note card, what we were doing, what we were teaching, what we were going to learn that day. And he went card to card religiously. Really? You know, and he's like, if we can learn this card today, we move on to the next card. And it was a process. And, you know, there was never a time when you were not mentally prepared for a game. You knew exactly what your job was, and he found a spot for every kid on that field, what they were going to be good at, you know. And you might walk in there and say, well, I'm going to be the wide receiver, and he'd be like, well, actually, no, you're too slow, and I think you're going to be a tight end or a tackle.
Yeah.
And taught them a position, and they accepted it, and everyone did their job, and I think that's what made him so successful.
Did you guys win some state titles when you were in high school?
We did. We won a state title when I was a junior.
Mm-hmm.
We played in the semifinals when I was a sophomore, and when I was a senior, we played in the semifinals. And
do you remember who you beat your junior year for state?
Columbus.
Oh, really?
Columbus. Yeah, they were tough, the Cougars.
How many kids were in your class back then?
60 in my graduating class in 1985.
Nowadays there's over 100.
Yeah.
100, 120 probably.
I think something like that.
Yeah, when I moved here, I think still for a year or two we were still a B class school. I know a lot of states do like 5A, 4A, whatever, and I can't keep track of what we kind of compare to, but Frenchtown at that point was kind of what you'd probably call middle of the road to a little bit smaller size school, where now we're like middle of the road to a little bit bigger end of the spectrum as far as the state of Montana goes. You know, now we're a Class A school.
Yeah.
We made that jump maybe in 2004 or something like that, 5.
Yeah, I think something like that.
It was right in there.
Yeah.
But Roscoe, he was a fun person for me to get to know just because of his dedication to the kids, his dedication in the gym. The guy just lived in there. And it's cool to see the impact. It really shows you the impact a coach can have on so many people, like in a community. You know, if that person, I think we have a habit these days, in so many places. I know where I grew up, they had the habit of running coaches out every few years, you know.
Yeah.
And you don't get the backing of the community and the administration and whatnot. But if you have a coach that's there for 30 years, they can really have a heck of an impact on a community.
Yeah, they really do. They really do. You know, because you hand your kid over and you say, okay.
Right.
Make them a responsible young adult.
Right.
Ultimately, that's their job, is, you know, to teach them a little work ethic, responsibility, dedication, and loyalty. Like, loyalty is like the big one.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I say loyalty all the time. I think if a person is loyal, that's like the most important trait that they can have. You know, be loyal to your employer, loyal to your spouse, loyal to your kids, you know, and your community, and just loyalty whatsoever.
Yeah. Did you go to college out of high school then?
I did. I went to Carroll College.
Yeah.
You know, I was thinking,
what was your plan at that moment?
I think that was my downfall. I really didn't have a plan.
Yeah.
You know, it was like I kind of figured, well, my brother went there and he was successful at it, and so maybe I'll just do what he did, you know. And so I went over there, studied biology. I thought, maybe I'll try and go to medical school or dental school or something. I don't know. Had
your brother become a dentist at that point, or was he on the track?
He was in dental school.
Okay. At
that point. And he and his wife both had graduated from Carroll College. And so I went to Carroll the first year, and man, it didn't, after the first year, I was just like, you know, my first semester was not that great, you know, away from home the first time. And then the second semester was a little bit better. I decided I wasn't going to do the medical field biology thing. It was just, I don't know, maybe it was overwhelming. I don't know. And, you know, that's when I started thinking about education. Tim Roscoe's dad was still there. He was the athletic director there at Carroll College. And so I talked to him a lot, you know, and so I thought, well, maybe I'll be a teacher, you know. I could be a teacher.
Yeah.
And
you'd have been a good teacher.
And then after the first years, it's like, you know, the expense, you know, because my folks, they really couldn't afford to send me to college. You know, they have a bunch of kids at home, and, well, not a bunch of kids at home, but, you know, not like my dad was rolling in the dough or anything and wasn't going to pay for it. back then it was like, well, you either just go get a loan and to pay for school, or you figure it out.
Right.
And I decided, well, maybe, I really enjoy roping, and I really like going to rodeos. And I think what I'll do is go back to Missoula, get on the rodeo team and rodeo, and maybe try and do this education thing. Maybe be a teacher and a coach.
Yeah.
And so I did that. I went back to Missoula, and that was probably a mistake. I should have went to Havre or Western, or I should have went somewhere small, because when I got to Missoula, it was just like I was lost. I was a lost cause. I was lost. Mm-hmm. You walk into a lecture class and there's like 500 kids sitting in there.
Right.
They didn't care if I was there. They didn't care if I showed up. They didn't care if I made it to class. They didn't care if I took the test.
Right.
And so I was like, I'd just go rope.
Mm-hmm.
I was working for Bill Mitty part-time, and, he had an indoor arena up Lolo Creek, and I'd keep my horse up there, and I would just rope. I was living on the Holt Ranch, right there in Lolo Creek, taking care of their longhorns, and I just roped all the time.
Yeah.
Every weekend you were somewhere to go, and during the week you were roping. And
were you still competing with the U?
I was, yeah. And so I was on the rodeo team, and it was just like, I didn't really have an advisor
right.
in college. Like, you need to take these classes. I was just taking credits so that I could rodeo.
Right. Paying to go to college just to be on the rodeo team.
Right. And they paid all my expenses to go to the rodeos. And, back, it was still a club sport there, but they still had money available. And so I was just roping and having a good time, and figured, hey, this is great. I'm a rodeo cowboy.
Yeah.
And travel around. I had a little 1972 Chevy pickup with a single horse trailer. Had one of them little push-in campers in the back, and the Northwest was my territory, man. I just like loaded up and
went. You had a little pickup bed camper.
Yeah, a little slide-in camper, and just every weekend I was gone.
Yeah,
gone somewhere. That didn't work well for school.
Yeah.
After a while, they told me, well, your grades aren't very good. You better figure this out. And then a little bit later, they're like, maybe you need to go do something else for a while and figure out if you want to be a college student.
Yeah.
So I just never finished.
When did you meet your wife, Desiree? Was it during that time?
It was after that. I met my wife in 92, and it was, I don't know, it's kind of sappy, but I met her at my brother's wedding.
Okay.
She and my sister-in-law were co-workers at Kmart.
Okay.
While she was going to college.
Yeah.
And so my brother Scott got married, and so I show up there. Well, they paired me up with this gal to walk down the aisle during the wedding. Well,
so
it's Desiree.
Yeah, you went to hit up the bridesmaids then.
I was like, holy cow, and then, so I was like, and she's an accountant, lived in Billings, worked for a public accounting firm for Pete Marwick. And I was like, wow, this girl's really got it together. Not to mention she's smoking hot, for me. I was like, wow, checks all the boxes,
Yeah.
And I was pretty smitten, and I made a lot of trips to Billings. Had a little black car I'd drive back and forth over there. Yeah. Made a lot of trips to Billings. But, or wherever she was working during the week, Public accountants, they travel around, so wherever she was at, I'd show up. We'd go to dinner or something like that.
Yeah.
But, and so we got married in 94, and life changed.
So you had a 72 pickup and a horse trailer, and you were rodeoing?
Well, I'd really moved up in the world, because at that point, I'd sold my 72, and I had a little, everyone's got to have a dually, right? So I had a I had a red 4-door dually pickup, and moved my camper from the little slide in to a little bigger slide in that had like a Lance camper that had a little shower in it, had a little more space in it.
Yeah.
And I was roping with Carl Tyler at the time. We'd been roping for a couple of years. You know, he wanted to go to the PRCA rodeos, and
did you guys have some success?
we did. I mean, that rodeo thing's tough, you know, especially for me, because it was like, you know, finances were everything.
Right.
I mean, so you were either like my glove box or my ashtray was either had a whole bunch of money in it, cash in it, or it was empty.
That was your bank account.
That was the bank account, you know, because I mean, I was definitely not very smart about how I did this stuff. You know, it was just like play it by ear, and I'm still kind of that way. Drives Desiree crazy, but you know, it's just like there's really no filters. Like, hey, let's try this. Yeah, all right, let's go do it. Let's go see if it happens or not.
Right.
Let's go see if it works. And so it was just, you know, it's either hit or miss. You're either making money or you're broke.
Right.
You know, and so I was like, it's time for a life change.
Yeah.
You know, it's time to like actually do something here.
Grow up.
You know?
Yeah. Well, and rodeo these days, it's tough because, like, I think that was common for all cowboys back then. It's kind of, I think, you know, kind of the old broke cowboy theme, and you know, whether it's an old Chrysler car with a buck and saddle in the back of it, or you know, an old truck with a camper and a bedroll and a old horse trailer. Yep. But these days, there's just so much money. It costs so much. I mean, the cost of fuel, entry fees and all that, but the cost of hay, the cost of grain, the cost of trailers and trucks, and you know, it's a little sad. Like I don't know how the clone of Bip Bagnell today that maybe grows up without much money can really afford to like go seriously rodeo. You know, it's expensive.
Oh yeah,
I see these guys at some of these NRA rodeos and stuff, and I'm just like, man, I don't know how you know, to try to go from there to someday being, you know, at the NFR, you know.
Oh yeah,
and
even
the cost
back then,
of horses, you know.
The cost of horses. That's crazy, and you know, so that was kind of like my dad's theory.
Maybe it was the same back then. You still were competing against guys that just had money for the horse, and maybe it hasn't changed, and it's just different levels of money. And
I think you're right. I think you're exactly right. I don't think it's changed a bit. You go to a rodeo and you watch them pull up, you know.
Yeah.
And it's the same today.
They're driving a combination of about $500,000 down the road.
Oh yeah, and they'll unload a $500 horse.
Yeah.
And so that was my dad's thing. My dad was always like, I'd rather show up at a rodeo with a $500 horse or a $500 truck and trailer and unload a $50,000 horse. That was his thing.
No, the horse is going to be
right
why you win or not.
And then
if you can actually do the thing. And
you got the guy that shows up in a, you know, $100,000 truck and trailer and unloads a $500 horse.
Right.
You know, and you know, that was one thing, and it's still kind of, I guess, kind of my thorn in my side is that, you know, I still got horses. You know, that's kind of like that drug in the back of my brain is like, you know, having a nice horse. And I've been lucky because I've had a lot of really nice horses. And, you know, granted, I drove an old truck and an old trailer, but when I unloaded my horse, it was a nice horse, whichever one I had with me. And a lot of times I'd let other people ride them, and because I'd get 25% or whatever they want. You know? And there were a lot of times when that's how I was making money, is letting somebody ride my horse.
They might be more talented than you at actually roping or getting something out of that horse.
Most definitely. And you know, when we were growing up, we didn't have money to go buy horses. And we raised a lot of nice horses, and Dad would be like, well, if you want to rope, go pick one out and go make it.
Yeah.
So we learned pretty early, you know, how to ride a horse, how to
train,
how to make one.
Yeah.
You know, and because they don't depreciate like a pickup or a trailer. Over time, they become worth more money every day that they're walking. And So that was one thing I learned, probably the smart thing I learned about horses.
Yeah.
And when to like cut the rope off and say, this,
right.
This one's not going to make grade. He's not going to get where we need him to go. And so that's pretty cool.
When you kind of had to grow up then and start thinking about job and family and you're married and all that stuff, is that when you went to work at Les Schwab or?
Actually, no, I went to work for the Department of Livestock in Billings.
Okay.
So we got married, before we got married, like I didn't even have a job. I just had some part-time jobs, part-time gigs.
Her dad was impressed with you.
I think her dad really liked me. I was, I don't know. I was a hard worker and opportunistic and I tried hard, but I think I was like a good person.
Yeah. Good kid.
Yeah. And her dad, he was the same way. Her dad and I are a lot alike.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, I really, just had some part-time jobs and whatnot. And, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to, I really love this lady and I'm going to marry her.
Yeah.
And so I was like, how do I do this? So first thing I did is I sold my calf roping horse.
That's true love right there.
It is. I sold that horse and bought a wedding ring. That's how I bought my wedding ring.
Really?
Yeah. And, and then from there on, we just figured life out, She taught me a lot and, moved to Billings, moved into her apartment and, went to work for the Department of Livestock as a brand inspector there in Billings. I showed up with a pillowcase and I don't even know if I had a pillow. I had a couple duffel bags and that was about it.
Yeah.
And she's like, well, where's all your stuff? I'm like, this is it. This is all I got.
Yeah.
But
that's awesome.
Yeah. That was the start of.
How long did you guys live over there?
We lived over there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yep. And then.
What made you come back here?
Public accountants, a lot of times they end up doing is they go to work for one of their clients. Mm-hmm. And so she had a job offer here with the bank in Missoula. And she decided that would be a really good option. And she kind of wanted to come back to Missoula. Her parents lived here and, her mom had some health troubles and so that was a good plan. And I was like, well, I have good resources in Missoula. I can get a job.
Yep.
I can get a job over there. I'm sure I can find something to do.
So what'd you find here?
I went to work at Les Schwab Tire.
Is that that's when you went and did that?
Yeah, it took me like a summer to get in there before they found me a spot. But, my brother Colin worked there and Andy Sherry, he gave me a job. He and his brother Max were our neighbors growing up. Andy spent a lot of time at our house.
Yeah.
He's kind of like a big brother to me. Mm-hmm. And when I moved back, I went and talked to Andy and his brother Max gave me a job there in the cap shop.
Yeah.
And so I worked in the recap shop there for Les Schwab. I did that for 12 years.
Yeah.
And then I moved up front when they closed the recap shop and went to work for Andy. Mm-hmm. And I was there for 16 years.
Yeah.
Up front. So almost 28 years total.
28 years at Schwab.
Yeah.
What do people not know about the tire industry? About, because a lot of people I think take certain jobs for granted, right? You just pull in, get tires, and people don't put a lot of thought into like behind the scenes, like what kind of work that is or what people do and what maybe do people not know? Well,
it happens every day. It doesn't go away.
Like the mail.
Yeah. When people don't really look at their tires or have an issue with their tires until they don't work.
Yeah.
Like a lot of things, they like being preemptive about your tires, but and when something doesn't work, it's an emergency.
Right.
It's a disaster.
Yeah.
And like at that store, it was always busy there and a lot of people don't realize, just how many other people are there with the same problem, same dilemma. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
But it's hard work. It's long hours. It's retail. So you don't know when you're going home that night.
Mm-hmm.
And if it snows, look out because it's going to get really busy and you spend a lot of hours there, and you're working with a lot of, different people. It's kind of like here, but here I think Andrew does a really good job of sorting through the group that he wants to put together. Where there is like, you need bodies. You just need to try and train them. And if they either make it or they don't.
If you've got a pulse, we'll take you kind of deal.
Sometimes it can be, especially now. I think that's kind of like at every business now. Is trying to get workforce and trying to get people that want to work and show up for work.
That's the thing that I see being one of the biggest struggles with what you did, because I don't think people, kind of my point of that question is like, I don't think people fully understand or respect like how hard a work that is, right? Like, go out and change your tires in your garage once. Now do that 50 more times that day, know?
Yeah.
And then do that 5 days out of the week or 6,
Right.
And like you say, when it, around here, I mean, we're coming up on it probably in another few weeks, but come November or whatever, like we'll get our first kind of little brush glance at winter, and people will panic.
Yeah.
About getting snow tires on.
Yeah. Yeah.
Talk about that time of year. I mean,
well, it was crazy. We would, if it snowed, we would start it, be there at 6:30 in the morning and start changing tires. Well, it's cold. Everything's frozen. There's snow on the ground. There's cars everywhere.
For a lot of years, you guys also did it all pretty much outside.
Yeah, we didn't have the indoor bays like they did. They just had an awning out there.
Yeah.
And
on the west side, so it would blow into it.
The wind would blow in there. And granted, I was only there for a few years when we were working outside. But, yeah, it was not very pretty. It was pretty miserable.
Yeah.
And the cars just kept coming until they were lining down the center of the street.
Yeah.
And they would just drop them off. And we would work till 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock, and then go home, come in the next morning, do it all over again.
Yeah. Outside in the weather. I mean, if even when they had that cover over the top of it, basically essentially a lean-to.
Yeah.
If it's 10 degrees outside, it's 10 degrees where you're working. It actually might have been colder if the sun was out. You might not have been in it until 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah.
For the last hour and a half of daylight.
Yeah. So I missed a lot of first halves of basketball games.
Yeah.
Because by the time I get out of work, I show up, they'd be at halftime,
Yeah. The other thing that I just, over the years, that just boggled my mind was your schedule, right? You always had Sunday off, but then it might be Sunday and Wednesday, and the next week after that was Sunday and Thursday and Sunday and Friday. And so, we had same age kid, Demi and Cassidy are same age. And so, a lot of sporting stuff, a lot of travel ball and a lot of that stuff was happening on Saturday.
Yeah. We worked a lot of Saturday.
Desiree was there, but you were working and, very rarely, every 6 or 7 weeks you would have a Saturday off.
Yeah, it's like every fifth week you would get a Saturday off. You start thinking about it, during basketball season, you might only have 2 Saturdays.
Yeah, and then during that busy snow time of year, if your Saturday happened to be, November 30th,
you were working
probably
6
working
days.
it.
Yep, you were working 6 days.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so there went your Saturday.
It was.
Yeah, it's a tough. Heavy tires, I see the guys in the truck shop. My dad will pull in with a dump truck, and they're changing a bunch of tires or recapping stuff, and tractor tires, backhoe tires, like all just heavy, hard work.
Yep.
Hunched over, bent over, putting patches on.
Yeah, my wife got one of those little watches that measures your steps.
Yeah.
I think I was averaging like 23 or 24,000 steps a day
at
the tire store.
Yeah, all on concrete, kneeling on concrete.
On your knees, yep.
Yeah. It's a tough gig.
It was a tough job.
Yeah.
But at the time, it had really good insurance and a really good retirement program, and it was steady.
Yeah.
Like there was really good job security there. And
Yeah.
so for me, having, 4 kids
Mm-hmm.
and my wife and I was like, this is a good place to be. I think this is a good spot. And once again, I had an older brother that did the same thing. And so I, if it worked for him, it's going to work for me. And so I just stayed there.
Yeah.
I always thought about doing something different or whatever, but I was like, the fear of failure and maybe, wanting to make sure that I was doing my loyal duty to provide.
Right. Well, that was the other thing is you became, several of those guys down there for your friend circles, friends and customers. You become the guy. You're the tire guy. Like that becomes literally your identity, because maybe that's the only time they see it, but you're trusted, right? Because you worry if you take your car in to get worked on or get tires or get whatever that you're going to get taken advantage, upsold, or, do I really need to get rid of these tires? Are they really unsafe? And, for us, it was like, you tell your daughter, like, call Bip or go see Bip, or you tell your best friend, go see Bip, oh, you're new to the area, go to Les Schwab, go see Bip, and you become that, really becomes a community, of people that like you serve within a store.
Yeah, most definitely. You have your customer base and they become your friends.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I was good at that.
Yeah.
I mean, I was like, because I grew up that way. I was like, figure out what they need and take care of them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of things are like, people want their money now. They want all their money right now. Mm-hmm. And my idea was like, my bosses didn't like it. My motto is like more for less. Mm-hmm. I can sell more tires for less. Mm-hmm. And, but it was just, help people out,
right.
Figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to keep coming back.
Yeah.
If they feel like you took care of them, they're going to come back to you and ask for your help again. And why not? That's your job, right? Your job is to help a customer.
Yeah.
So.
Talk about, you had 4 kids?
I have 4 kids.
Right.
Yes.
Talk about how you, like, what your parenting style was or whatever, because that was one thing that I noticed as we got to know each other. You had great kids, like really, really good kids. And all your, and I knew your girls the best, but they were always driven and they were always involved in lots of different things. Like they were very involved kids in their school or in their community. Where did that come from exactly? Like, were you real involved in like 4-H and different programs as a kid?
I was, my mom was a 4-H leader for Frenchtown Valley 4-H, which I am now. Desiree is now. My dad started the stadium committee way back in 1980 when they built the school, and now I'm part of the stadium committee. Mm-hmm. All those things I learned as a kid growing up, like help people, do the work, put your head down, get stuff done, be responsible, help others, have a little grit, have a little grit in your life, like when we were growing up, my first job was riding colts for my dad. We had 2-year-olds and 3-year-olds and we rode colts. And so you got pretty gritty, like it was a tough job. And so I think when we had kids, I kind of kept that going in the way that I raised my kids. It's like, I tried to stay real super black and white, like yes is yes and no is no.
Right.
Don't be gray, but be fair. And, just like if they wanted to try something, and this is probably my biggest problem is I don't know how to say no.
Yeah.
If they want to try something and they're like going to put the effort out, heck yeah, let's go try it. And if there's some programs, well, enter up. Let's just enter all of it. Go do it.
Yeah.
You know, if you want to try it, jump in there and do it. Give it your all and see what happens.
Yeah, because your girls were taking horses to horse competitions, dogs to dog competitions, raising pigs, raising steers, raising cows, breeding projects.
Yep.
But then also involved in club sports and academic programs and just kind of like everything.
Yeah, and they were successful at it. You know, 70% comes from the mare. We've heard that before, right? Thank God for their mother, you know, because, you know, a lot of that competitive instinct and brains and logical thinking comes from their mother.
Yeah.
Doesn't come from me. I can guarantee you that. I think all I gave them was just the ability to be gritty.
Yeah.
Just be gritty,
Yeah.
tough, head down.
Which your wife also has, so maybe they got everything from their mom.
Yeah, maybe they did. Darn it. I was trying to lay claim to something, but I don't know. It's just like, you know, we took them to church.
Did you feel like parenting was hard?
Oh, I was, after Caleb, when he was born, I was done. I was like, we're not having kids again. Caleb was born at 31 weeks.
Oh, wow.
He weighed like 2.5 pounds.
Wow.
And he was in the NICU for 2.5 months.
Really?
I don't know how he survived it. You know, you look at babies and, you know, you think that they're these small little precious things that are so, you know, so vulnerable. And in my opinion, that's not true at all. That you'd be surprised what a baby can survive. I mean, he had stomach surgery when he was a month old.
Really?
And he only weighed, he only weighed 2.5, 3 pounds when they did that. You know, it was just crazy. And that kid, after that kid was born, I was like, man, I'm done. I am not going through this again.
Yeah.
Just the ups and downs but man, that kid is tough.
Yeah.
You know, from day one, he was tough. That's why we call him tough, you know, just because he had to be tough to survive that. And for Desiree, you know, to go through what she went through, you know, because she wanted to be a mother so bad and wanted to hold that baby and take care of that baby and make that baby better. And she couldn't. She had to, you know, let everybody else jump in there. And she never left the hospital.
Yeah.
For like 2 months. She stayed at the hospital.
Really?
And was still working at the time, you know.
Yeah.
And so she'd stay at the hospital at night, and then in the morning she would be down there with Caleb, and then she would go to the office for a little bit and come back, and then go to the office for a little bit and come back. But that was hard. And then the guy part of me kicked in later. I was like, you know, she was ready to have, you know, more kids, and I was like, okay, you know, sounds good to me, you know. And so then the girls came along after that, and being an accountant, they're all 2 years apart.
Yeah, of course.
You know, leave it up to the accountants to figure out how that works.
Yeah.
But so it was exciting. It was fun. I mean, as my kids grew up, you know, we invested everything we had in them, you know, and it was a ton of fun. Yeah. It still is. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. To me, that's the thing, is like those first few years are, my theory on it is if you really do your job in the first 3 years, 4 years, really before they hit kindergarten, the next 15 years really are pretty easy. I mean, it's busy and it's whatever, but it's fun.
Most definitely.
If you don't do your job in the first 5 years, then the next 15 are going to be hard. So choose, do you want a hard 5 or a hard 15?
Yep.
Or more. It felt like, to me, looking outside in, from the time I really knew, especially Claire and Cass, your younger two daughters, that like parenting wasn't that hard for you guys, you know, because I knew them, let's say kindergarten on, right? Like parenting at that point, not that it wasn't busy and not that you're not in all these programs and doing all this and that and whatnot, but like not like stressful hard, right? Because you guys had clearly done your job before they got to kindergarten. And then at that point, it's like kids are going to make mistakes. They're going to do little things here and there, but it's tweaks.
Right.
It's adjustments. It's like kind of patting them back over onto the path.
Yeah.
And bumping them over. And, they are humans. They do get a vote, so they have to also, because I've seen a lot of good parents do what I thought was like all the right stuff, and they still ended up with some shitheads.
Yeah, the only advice I have for parents is like, read a lot of books to your kids. Desiree read to those kids. I mean, we have boxes of books. Mm-hmm. She read to them and get them outside. Mm-hmm. And, our kids were like, if they weren't outside, they were in the house and they're reading books. Mm-hmm. They were reading, and they were busy. Mm-hmm. And we were at the barn and we were, had calves that they were bottle feeding, and, they experienced all that outdoor activity stuff, They were riding bikes and they were, using their imagination. The girls made little flags. Actually, I helped them. We made them out of cardboard so they would stick out straight. And they had the little neighbor girl, and they all rode around on their ponies and horses and carrying these flags around, Mm-hmm. They just came up with fun stuff to do.
Yeah.
And so they were outside all the time.
That's the other thing I always say is generally busy kids are good kids.
Yeah. And so when our kids got into high school, it's like, they didn't get in trouble because, number one, they didn't have time to get in trouble.
Right.
They had all this stuff going on.
Right.
And, there was like a light at the end of the tunnel, and they could see it.
Yep.
They knew they pretty much knew what they wanted to do and what they wanted to accomplish. And there was lots of opportunity. And like I said, we never said no.
Yeah. Yeah.
We said, let's go do it.
I've never had to, push my kids to get good grades, or, I think a lot of that stuff was instilled kind of early on at school, with going to school.
Yep.
Like, hey, you're going to do a good job and this and that, and kind of setting the expectation early. But with Sadie and Demi, I never had to tell them to try to get A's.
No.
In fact, it's a little bit the opposite coming towards the end of Sadie's senior year of and if I did everything over again, I might do it just a little bit different about maybe you don't need to take that one extra honors class. You're in all this other stuff. It's okay to have just a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think with kids, especially girls like yours that were so academically proficient and held themselves to such a high standard, that you can also then put undue pressure on yourself by adding, you're trying to get that credit for your freshman year of college, but you can also do that your freshman year of college. Maybe it's okay to just take an art class and have a little bit of fun in the afternoon, your senior year, or, because I do see that with kids, a lot of this pressure for these AP courses and college credits. And it's nice when they go to college and some of that's taken care of. But I can also see there being, just a little bit of that kid life and that fun missed out on,
Yeah. It was weird because I never, with my kids in school, it's like I really wasn't involved in what they were taking in school. Same. Or doing, because I didn't have to be. They'd come home and tell me what they were doing.
Same.
And they were all super successful at it and just killed it. Mm-hmm. And it pays off down the road. Because it's helped them. They're all superstars, every one of them, just
they are. Yeah.
They just rocked it.
Yeah. It's cool. You were talking earlier about your dad starting the stadium fund. That's a small town thing for people that don't know. Basically a bunch of community members got to town, wanted to build a football stadium here, but didn't have, school didn't have the money. Nobody, there wasn't a big donor there to just build it. So they started doing fundraiser stuff to save money for a stadium and then get a loan and then pay that loan off. And that, what's cool is, what year did that start?
That was in 1980 when they built the school.
1980. And so in 2024, we're still going to, the stadium And they say it's a stadium. It's a
big concrete bleacher.
Big concrete, bleachers. Not a big like Texas football stadium.
Definitely not.
But then over the years they got that done. They started donating money, whether it was buying instruments for the band or sound systems or soccer stuff or whatever. Right. It's been cool to be a part of a community that just comes together, and this is outside of the school, just a bunch of community members that get together and put on events and raise money and then help in the extracurricular activity areas of the town pay for different things, And I came from a town that didn't really do that, and it's easy to go to some of these towns and be like, oh, look how lucky these people are. Look how much money they have or whatever, and it's like, kind of that mentality a little bit that people have with social media. They get on social media and they're like, oh, so-and-so's lucky. Look how lucky he is. He has all this stuff. And it's like, what you don't see is the mountain of work behind the scenes that got that person to that point.
Right.
Yeah. And what this community has done, over, 44 years, just chipping away a little bit at a time, 10 grand, 20 grand a year, whatever that money is. Boy, you do that for 40 years and you look up and it's like, oh, this community's done some neat things, has some neat stuff, Yeah, and I think it's probably easy for other towns to just look at it and think that like somehow Frenchtown's like overly wealthy or whatever. And it's quite the opposite. Once the paper mill went away, I'd say it's been a struggle for a lot of people in this community.
It is a struggle at the school, as far as funding.
Yeah.
And you want to have a program for every kid. I think having a program that fits a shoe for every kid. Mm-hmm. Because, maybe a kid doesn't want to be in basketball. Maybe they want to be in the performing arts. Maybe they want to be in music, speech and debate. There's got to be something out there. They have a new FFA program, which is great. And if you can find something to involve every kid in school, maybe they come to class that day. Maybe they come to school that day because they've got this activity that they're really involved in. And so, that's as far as the stadium committee, that's the void we fill is like, if there's a need for something and we have the money, then let's get it going. Mm-hmm. And so, we only pay for capital venture items, we don't pay for upkeep, we don't pay for travel,
right.
We don't pay for meals, but we'll buy you the equipment, we'll buy you the items that you need to make a program successful. And
sure.
And it's been good because everybody in the community is paying for it.
Right.
And everybody has, a dollar bill in the bucket to make it work.
Yeah.
And that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah. No, it's really cool. And now your dad's name's on that stadium.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty neat. They did that. I think that was like in 2009 or 2010, right after he passed away. And they honored his legacy with naming the stadium for him. And that was pretty cool, pretty neat.
Well, and he was the football announcer for years, so now you're the football announcer.
Yeah, once again, I'm just following someone. If it worked for them, it's got to work for me, right? And so he announced the football games there for probably, 20 years.
Yeah.
Maybe more, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no idea. But, so they came to me and said, hey, what do you think? Would you like to do this? And actually, it was a weekend when my dad couldn't do it. And so I was like, sure, I'll fill in for you,
Yeah.
It was kind of fun. It was kind of cool.
Yeah.
Perspective being up there. And I don't know.
Out of the rain, kind of a good little spot to watch the game.
Yeah. Yeah. And I kind of have the gift for gab, I guess.
Yeah.
People say. And as my mom would say. And so it was fun. It was simple. And I kind of try to make it my own a little bit, kind of change. There's a few things I still save. That came out of his vocabulary, like halfway to the hayfield and the big ditch or whatever. And but it's been fun. It's been cool.
Yeah, and you play the music and do all that stuff, and the crowd gets into it. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, you go to some of these other stadiums and they have all these keyboards and all this. I have my cell phone and a cord plugged into my cell phone, but with help from some friends of mine and my kids, I've able to have a playlist, and it makes it pretty easy and it's fun.
It's cool to see you do things around the community. The other thing that you're super involved in, we talked a little bit about it, is the 4-H. But what's really cool is you don't have any kids left in the 4-H program now. And a lot of parents move on. Kids are out of school and they kind of vaporize, right? And you still dedicate, you take a week of your own paid vacation off during the fair every year to go be the barn superintendent for the hog barn and go to all the 4-H meetings. It's funny, we just had our first 4-H meeting of the year a couple nights ago, and Hank, now my kids are older, and Hank came home and he was talking about what little peckerheads some of the new young little kids were being, and Bip had to separate some kids, and Bip had to move, and
my word,
Hank really wanted to be Sergeant Arms because he wanted to help straighten out some kids. He was like, God, they were being terrible, Dad. Bip kept having to, wrangle these, because, you get these little 7, 8, 9-year-old kids in there that have never been in 4-H, and they maybe don't have as much structure as they should, or sit there and learn how to sit through a 4-H meeting. And but it's like, it's really cool, and it makes me like, what makes you want to stay involved in that stuff even now you don't have kids in it?
Well, first, thanks for the paid vacation for that week. That was helpful. It's just like, maybe it's something I'm good at. Mm-hmm. It's like I'm trying to find things that I'm good at. Mm-hmm. And, I think helping kids be successful, maybe I'm good at that. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm good at just helping people be successful at things. Mm-hmm. And for me, it keeps me involved in it. I enjoy it. I like watching the kids grow through the program, and Desiree is the same way. I mean, she's the cooking leader, and she's actually the organizer for the club, and we're both kind of on the same page. It's like we watch these kids grow up through the program, just like Hank. A while ago, Hank was the little peckerhead sitting in the front, being an idiot, and now he's leading the charge. But we've had kids that show up at the cooking meeting and can't even stand in front of 5 other kids and talk about the cookie they made. And 3 years later, they're just bouncing when they walk in the house and have a great time and get up and do a demonstration and talk. They're not shy anymore. They're not shy. They talk to people. They believe that they can do it. They have the confidence to do it. Mm-hmm. And the same thing goes for animal projects. Like I said, the best thing for a kid is an animal. And so these kids, they don't think that they can do it. They get to the fair and they're nervous and scared, and they make it through it the first year, and then they grow a little bit. And the second year they succeed, and you like to see kids succeed. And so I don't know. It's like, what else am I going to do? I have, not that I have a lot of free time, but why not invest my time in who's coming behind me? You know?
Well, and I've seen you let kids, you've helped facilitate kids that maybe don't have a place to have a 4-H pig, or a steer, keep it at your house, or help set it up maybe at a spot behind your brother's dentist office, or whatever. But you help kids facilitate being in that program, because I think that's probably, that program's, if that kid wants it that bad that he's willing to keep his pig at your house, that's probably a kid that needs it the most too.
Yeah, and I think it's a good program. I think it's a program that makes better people.
Yeah.
And once again, it's like, well, if I don't do it, who's going to do it?
Yeah.
Right.
And I think we're decent parents, but I think 4-H has 100% has had a huge impact on the kind of like humans my kids are leaving high school. We don't have a lot of outside struggle, right? As far as like my kids without 4-H, pretty much life would just revolve around them. You take them to basketball games and take them to this and take them to that. And, our kids wouldn't have much that they would really have to be responsible for, right? Compared to a kid that's grown up on a ranch or a farm, right? That kid doesn't necessarily need 4-H. He's got chores and things he's responsible for. But by all of a sudden having had animals, even if they get home from their game at 10 o'clock at night, they still have to go to the barn and feed their animal, right? Or just carve out some time on a Sunday to go tie up their steer and work on brushing it because he doesn't like his legs touched, or and work through some of those. And not only that, but the having to stand up in front of meetings and talk in front of their peers, talk in front of people, and then beyond that, as it comes towards fair time, to learn how to do a little marketing, and people do wonder sometimes, like, why do certain kids do better at the auction than other kids? And it's like, well, some of these kids actually are going out and they're going and like talking to businesses, and I remember taking my kids, in the beginning, you had to drive your kids around everywhere to go market their animal. And in the beginning, I'd just walk in and listen, and then we'd get back in the car and you'd coach them and be like, okay, well, Hank, Demi did all the talking, but you didn't say anything, right? And so you're going to have to speak, and, how do you, and it's not just, will you come to the fair and buy my animal, right? You have to tell them, what is the fair? What is 4-H? What kind of an animal do you have? And they learn how to be comfortable talking in front of people to the point where by the time they have driver's licenses, my kids actually look forward. They take off in the car together and they go talk to a bunch of different businesses, and they split up some of the responsibilities of who's talking and whatnot. But that kind of stuff all was taught through that. Like, I don't think my kids would have had, I don't know that I would have been able to give them that experience just through parenting without 4-H.
Yeah, I think it's huge. I think that's like the biggest thing that they're going to gain from 4-H is adulting, how to be an adult, and they might not realize how useful of an item it is until someday they're gonna, my daughter Claire's in law school. They were like, I think 4-H had a lot to do with that. Yeah, because when you look at an application, what separates you from the other, type A personality, 40 other people that are applying for a spot, and here you have a kid that, is the type A personality that was a college athlete that did a ton of community service and
president of her club and all this
and stuff. Raised 4-H pigs. Like raised pigs, and was a leader in their 4-H club.
Yep.
And had all the experience from 4-H. It's like, wow, that's like a wide band of abilities right there for a kid her age.
And I love the responsibility shift that happens. Like when your kids are little, my kids were younger and they were looking up to your kids, like Callie and Claire, right? But then as my kids get older, that shift starts to happen and your kids go away. And then now, last year there's young kids looking up to like my daughter Sadie, right? And now she's gone, and, Hank's moving into that a little bit, and he needs to, and I've talked about, being a little bit more vocal and being a little bit more of a leader. And also with his position of being an athlete and somebody that maybe some kids look up to in school, your voice can have an impact in like 4-H meetings with those young kids. Like, he plays on the varsity football team. Like you now have a platform that you can kind of stand on there and say, like, Bip, I got this, right? Stand up and say, hey, sit down and be quiet, right? And even the things that I saw of, when my kids were young about, we want to sleep in. It's like, nope, you got to be to the barn at the fair at 6 a.m. to the shift to where later on, the last few years, kids are like, should we be here about 6:30? And my daughter's like, nope, we're going to be here at 5:30. And I'm like, damn, you're kind of a hard driver.
Well, and it never goes away.
No.
You know, Calliana, my oldest daughter, loves the fair. Her birthday is during the fair. And she's in grad school, and her big thing last summer was to be home to work at the fair, to help me at the fair.
Sure.
And so she wanted to stay at the camper, stay at the fair, and
that's cool. Be
over there early in the morning and spend the day there, and just like jump right in, dive in and help. And here, all my girls, and we're there, the last day of the fair when we're hauling all the animals out of the barn, and they're helping load animals, and, working to make it successful. And so it's just like, it never goes away. Once they get that experience in them, they always want to do it,
Yeah.
They just.
Well, and I've said this, once you're the confidence shift, I remember, like Sadie and Demi decided to do steers. And in the beginning, we were watching like Ben Newberry and those guys doing their steer stuff. And we were kind of sniffing around it and looking at it. And it's like, it's a big animal, it's 1,400 pounds, and you've got this little girl that's, 70 pounds, 80 pounds, 100 pounds, whatever. Right. And they're scary, right? They can kick you, and they can ram you, and they can drag you across the arena if you don't let go of their rope, and all these things, right? And when you get them, they are wild little buggers, right? And they're, Sadie got dragged through the mud in the barn. She learned a valuable lesson. There is a moment you should let go of the rope.
Yes, there is.
Like, it's like, don't let go, okay? I'm going to hand you this rope. You don't want him to get away. He's going to learn, right? So don't let go. And then at a certain point, it's like, yeah, you should have let go.
Yeah, it's instilled in them. Don't let go. Caleb was so little when he was growing up that we'd go to the rodeos, and they always have sheep riding, right?
Yeah.
Well, Caleb, he's like, I got sheep at home. He rides sheep all the time at home. He could really ride a sheep.
Yeah.
And he was like 7 years old. He weighed like 40 pounds, and we'd go to the rodeo, and they'd have sheep riding. I'd enter him. And so we'd be over there, and Caleb would be getting in there in the chute, and they'd be like, okay, are you ready? And, Calliana, she was always with us, and she'd like, Caleb, don't let go. Yeah. Don't let go, Caleb. And he would get on there and ride them things, all the way across the arena forever, And then, as kids grow up, that don't let go thing, Callie was the same way, and she had her steer, and the steer would drag her around. She wouldn't let go. Mm-hmm. And then Cass, finally her last year of 4-H, she decided to take a steer. And as the girls have raised club calves at home, and Callie let her have one of her calves, and Cass shows up. Well, this thing, he's wild. Mm-hmm. This steer, he's a little honky, and he was honky from day one. And I could never get him gentle enough. And
yeah,
and here we unload him out of the trailer. He comes out of there and slides across the concrete through the sawdust pile, and I've got a hold of him, and here's Cass, one arm on the rope still, on her side, getting, and I'm like, let go, Cass, let go. So I don't know, maybe that's a good thing. Our kids just don't let go.
But that confidence at the end of the project, standing in the ring with a 1,450-pound steer, 1,400-pound steer, and they weigh, 120 pounds.
Oh yeah.
And they're controlling the steer that's like, oh nope, she won't let me go over there. I can't go over there. But that confidence of like in the beginning being scared to the point where for the next number of years they just own it. Yep. I think that confidence carries through life. Like if I always told my kids, if you can control and dominate a 1,400-pound steer, there's nothing you can't handle.
Yeah, that's just cool confidence.
It is. It's really cool.
It is. Yeah.
And especially for girls too, like, you can do the same stuff guys can do,
Yep.
So, and that same stuff goes for a horse, right? For people who ride horses, train horses, right? You're controlling a big animal, and it takes a lot of confidence. They're scary at first, but it's cool that once you've done that, it's like, well, I've trained horses. I can walk into this business and talk to them about a job. They're not as scary as my steer was.
Yeah.
Yep.
Most definitely. Yeah. That confidence builder thing is just huge. I mean, you carry it with you through life, and I think it's a good trait to have in your wheelhouse. Do
you have a best piece of advice you've ever been given by someone?
Oh man, I don't know. I have a lot of them. A lot of them.
Yeah.
Like our house growing up, it was always ride for the brand. When we were kids growing up, it was just like ride for the brand. And a lot of people are like, oh, what's ride for the brand? And it's just like, you're, like I said, loyalty. You just got to be loyal to who you are and those around you. Be confident. Be secure with your decision. Don't waffle. Be black and white.
Right.
I don't know. I could just go on forever on stuff like that.
Do you what do you think about what's going on here as far as like how's your experience been being a sharpener and seeing MKC grow and some of that? It's
crazy. It's huge. Just everything going around. Like, look, I'm sitting in a podcast right now. Who'd ever thought I'd be sitting here
10 years ago, we were coaching the 4th grade girls basketball together.
Yeah. And switching the armbands so we have the right girl guarding the right girl. So
we could own Y-ball.
Yeah. Cass, take the tall one. So yeah, it's exciting. I mean, like I said, Andrew does a really good job of picking people. And that's the big thing is like, you got to pick the right people to work for you. And I think that you guys have been good at that. And everyone there is motivated. Everyone downstairs is motivated. Everyone that works offsite, I think, is motivated. It's really nice having the transparency that you guys offer, because it's cool to sit in a meeting and know what's coming down the pipe. What's coming up next? What are we doing? Why are we doing this? And so everyone has all that information, and so it makes them like a little more invested in it. They're not just doing a job; they're like trying to do the job to accomplish, the prize, the goals,
right?
And so for me, it's like a breath of fresh air. My old job, it was just, you'd have a lot of people, they didn't want to be there. They were it was just an hourly paycheck maybe for some of them kids. They didn't know if they were going to come back the next day or not.
Right.
These guys are looking at the future. They got a new building coming and they're excited about the new building and wanting to be a part of it. You have these trade shows that they get to go to and talk about the product, talk about what they're making. They're making history, really.
Yeah.
And for me, it's just like a complete change of pace because the intricate work that I do now, I'm not using the sledgehammer on a bent wheel.
Right.
I'm freehanding, sharpening knives that are going to go to a customer.
Sure.
And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy the intricate detail. So I'm trying to get to Melissa's bar, which is
a tough one.
It's a high bar for me, for an old guy to get to, but I'm trying really hard. And
what's it like coming to work and reporting to a 21 and 25-year-old?
Well, number one, I already know that they're way smarter than I am and probably will ever be, no matter what I do. And so I accept their knowledge. And they're super fair. Their understanding of people's feelings and their understanding of what's around them and what's going on in the shop. And, it's new for them too. I'm sure it's a little bit scary for them. They got this old pig farmer guy showing up and they're like, oh man, who's going to go tell him that this knife doesn't look very good?
Right.
And so, yeah, it's a learning curve for everybody. And, someone's got to do that job. And if they're the one that's qualified to do it, then have at it, do it. And you give me direction and I'll follow it. If I can make them better, they're going to make me better.
Right.
And it all comes out in the wash. Right. So that's how I look at it. I'm like, I don't care who my boss is. If they're the one that was picked to be the boss, they're the one.
Right.
That's it.
Yeah. And it's, I think that's the thing to try to get across to everybody in the building is that we're all learning. We're all in new roles. Andrew's been in his role before. Brandon somewhat in his role as far as marketing, but not as a business owner and leader and stuff like that. So, for sure, myself in my position, Jess and hers, and then really all the way down. Tristan was a high school kid, right? Melissa was fresh off the street, had been doing some excavation stuff for a month or two, and was really quite shy and maybe not super confident. And had no idea about making knives, right? And that's probably the most gratifying thing to me is the time that we've invested in them to see that growth, right? And there's so much more to come for them. Like they're still drinking from a fire hose, and about the time that I think they think they're through it, a bigger fire truck with a bigger hose shows up, But my hope is that people actually in the shop see the path they've been on and see that there's that same path for them available,
No, definitely. That's huge. I mean, it's just, I think everyone's going to grow together. We're all figuring it out.
Yeah.
And in the end, it's going to work. It's going to, it's going to turn out how you wanted it to turn out. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's pretty cool. Well, basically, will you be able to see our new shop from your house practically? Yeah,
I can walk across the highway.
Yeah.
Ride my bike. My wife says, I just ride your bike. I'm like, I don't know about going over the bridge on my bike. But
yeah, we need a tunnel under the interstate right there.
Yeah, that would be cool. But
well, I appreciate you jumping in here. I appreciate you, being a part of the team. And we talked about it for a while before you made the jump, but I knew it would be really nice to have your experience and just, just the kind of human you are, an example you are as far as community. I mean, there's a spot on our review form that really could just say, are you like Bip? And we could rate you on, cause it says community, and it's, you're really the epitome of what that category's like. And some people aren't going to be super involved and do lots of things, or maybe we won't know about it or whatnot. But then there's other people that I think that maybe have that personality, but don't know how, or haven't seen it modeled. Right. And it's part of why I talk about it. It probably makes you feel uncomfortable, but in meetings every now and then I'll bring up what you're doing and stuff because, not that you need the attaboy, cause you don't do it for that anyway. But that I think it's just a great example to highlight for everyone else, for maybe there's a few people in our shop that will, and some of those lessons may not even completely take hold for 10, 15 more years when they have kids or beyond, Yeah. But they might be like, oh, there was this old pig farmer I used to work with that used to do this, and I'm going to go try to lead some kids and do that, or something. You just don't know where those lessons will end up showing through. It could be with Tristan in 20 more years, or any number of kids down there. So it's good to highlight people. I think more companies should take time to highlight people who are doing special things like that outside of just making dollars and cents for the company.
Yeah, the dollars and cents thing. I don't know. I say this a lot in my reviews or when we talk about stuff. And for me, it's not really about money, cause I grew up not much money. I had a lot of other things. I had nice horses. I had some good dogs, but I didn't, money wasn't one of those things. Mm-hmm. And so sometimes it doesn't mean a lot to me, I guess. You know, I've had a lot of jobs, lots of different jobs, and I have like a lot of talents.
Mm-hmm.
Just seems like the talents that I have really aren't financially worth a lot of stuff, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Like last night, Caleb and I, we AI'd a border collie. That's kind of, that's a talent.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so those, you know, all these little talent things that I have, they're not worth anything financially, but they're worth, I think over time, they're worth a lot in other ways.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I look at. It's like,
yeah.
all I have is my talents and my time. I don't have much for treasures, but.
Well, and maybe it encourages someone to not be afraid to, you know, they've got their day job, but try things in the evening on their own, you know.
Yep.
Have different hobbies or try different stuff, and you just never know where it goes, or
where it's going to lead you.
Bet. Or maybe where it'll lead your kid someday. Maybe your kid will think that hobby's cool, and then they'll take it and run with it.
It's worked for me. I mean, my kids it seems like they've all kind of picked out a little something that I've done in the past, you know.
Well, and it's cool because actually, technically, your one daughter, Cassidy, was an employee here before you.
Cass.
She was part-time kind of summer help. She's same age as my oldest daughter, and so Cassidy worked here now a couple summers, and then this year we had Claire, your other daughter, in here, and so there was 3 Bagnells reporting to work.
Yeah, it was great. We go home, talk about work. It was a ball. We laugh all night long about something funny that happened during the day at work. Yeah. That's good. You're not going home complaining or griping. You're laughing about what happened during the day.
Yeah, it's good.
But it's been great. Yeah. Yeah, Cass loves it here, so is Claire.
That's good. Well,
we've had a good time.
Great humans. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Bip.
Hey, thanks for having me.
I normally ask people where they can find them on, people can find them on social media and all that, but I guess
I could give you my cell phone number. That's about all I know, but I don't know that I'm supposed to do that. But
I think if
you need to get a hold of me, just come to
a football game.
Come to a football game, or go to a 4-H meeting, or go to the ranch horse competition, or go to the fair,
or rodeo, Helmville Rodeo.
I'm around. You can find me.
All right. Thanks, Bip.
Thank you.